Welcome back, guys. So this is module 8, and in this module we will be discussing socket programming. So we will be discussing how to write a client server based model in C. We will be discussing how to write a TCP and UDP based networking applications. That is, we will be discussing the socket programming, and in that socket programming we will be actually implementing a TCP client server program. And we will also discuss the UDP client server program, but that we will discuss in brief detail because all the magic lies in of socket programming, all the magic lies in the TCP client server model. Of course, we will be discussing the select system call, which enables us to implement multiplexing. Now, what is multiplexing? Multiplexing means how to handle multiple client connection requests. And we will discuss the TCP server design steps. That is, what are the steps you should follow in order to write a TCP server program. And then we will have a project based on socket programming. So what actually server is? So the definition of server is that server is any machine which receives the request, processes the request, and optionally returns back the result to the client. Now, what is client? Client is any machine which initiates the request. So we will quickly write a simple client server hello world model shortly. So in the below diagram, the machine on the left hand side represented by C is actually a client machine, whereas the machine on the right hand side represented by S is the server machine. So you can see it is the client which initiates the request. The server processes the request, and optionally the server replies back to the client. Note that server machines never initiates the communication. The initiation of communication is supposed to be done only by the client machine. And also note that client and server machines are present on the internet. So in between, there could be any number of L3 routers between the client and the server machines. So basically, you are writing a program called client program, which will send data to the server machine present anywhere on the internet. The server machine, after processing the request, replies back to the client. So this is what is called network applications. Network applications are those applications which send or receive data over the network. So Linux operating system provides two important system calls. Using these two system calls, we write TCP servers. So these two system calls are used to write TCP servers. Why I am not talking about UDP servers? I am currently not talking about UDP servers because UDP servers are embarrassingly easy to write. If you learned how to write TCP server, it is very trivial and easy to write UDP servers. So let us hit the hard thing first. We will going to discuss the implementation of TCP server in detail. So in C, it is difficult to write a socket-based application without the use of select and accept system call. So these are the two system calls that you should study, understand in detail. In the interview, it is very much probable that you will be asked the question based on select and accept system call. That is what is the purpose of these two system calls, how do they work, and how these two system calls help you to accomplish the networking based programming. So from interview point of view, understanding these two system calls is very important. So let us first grasp the idea of these two APIs. Having understood these two system calls, remaining socket programming APIs would automatically fall in place. So going forward, we're going to discuss the accept system call. So we will going to write two applications, client.c and server.c. Client.c actually represents a client C and server.c actually represents a TCP server. So in file client.c, we will going to implement the functionality of the client. That is, the client will going to initiate the request, and in server.c file we will going to implement the functionality of the TCP server. That is, receiving the client connection request, receiving the client data, processing the data, and replying back to the client. We will going to implement server functionality in server.c and client functionality in client.c. Now let us discuss the accept system call. First of all, accept system call is used by the TCP server. That is, accept system call is used on the server side. And what is the purpose of accept system call? The accept system call is used to accept the new client connection request by the server. So you have a client C and you have a server S. The first thing that the client has to do is to establish the connection with the server. For that, the client has to send the connection initiation request. So this is connection initiation request. In connection initiation request, the client says that, hey, I want to establish the TCP connection with you. So it says this information to the server. So the accept system call on the server side is used to accept the new client connection request. This is the purpose of accept system call. So remember, TCP is a connection-oriented protocol. That is, client and server needs to establish a dedicated connection first before they can participate in any data exchange activity. Right? So the first thing that the client and the server needs to do is to establish bidirectional TCP connection. Before any data exchange happen between the client and the client and the server has to establish the bidirectional TCP connection between them. The initiation of this connection is done by the client. And client does this by sending the connection initiation request to the server. The accept system call on the server side is actually used to process the connection initiation request triggered by the client. Let us say, for example, when you log in into Facebook, your machine sends connection request to Facebook servers. Facebook servers accept your connection request using accept system call. Now you can send data to Facebook servers, and Facebook servers can update your page with notification and feeds. So the sole purpose of accept system call is just to establish the connection between the two machines, that is the client machine and server machine. And it is done by carrying out TCP three-way handshake. So TCP connection is established by using three-way handshake protocol. Now again, the details of the three-way handshake protocol is out of the scope of this course. If you study the TCP internal, you will also study what is three-way handshake protocol. So again, I advise you or refer you to the standard textbooks to know about the internals of the TCP. For now, the bidirectional TCP connection set up between the client and the server requires a three-way handshake mechanism. So the accept system call actually helps in achieving three-way handshake mechanism between the client and the server. So accept system call is called only on the server side, and it returns the handle to the connection with the client. So accept system call, first of all, the accept system call is used only on server side. It is not used on the client side. And second thing, that when the server invokes the accept system call, the accept system call returns the handle to the connection with the client. Now what is handle? Handle is nothing but it is just an integer value, say 6. So 6 actually represents a dedicated connection between the client and the server. Using this handle, server carries out all future communication with that client. This handle is called communication file descriptor. Why it is called communication file descriptor? Because actual communication between the client and the server after the connection has been established is done using this handle. That is why it is called communication file descriptor. So you can see the diagram, you have a client and the TCP server is running somewhere in the network. The first thing the client does is to send a connection initiation request to the TCP server. So this is the step 1. Client sends the connection initiation request using connect system call. Therefore, connect system call is used only on the client side. When the server receives the connection initiation request from the client, the first thing that the server does is to accept the client connection request using accept system call. As soon as the accept system call is invoked, the accept system call returns communication file descriptor, which is nothing but an integer value. Using this communication file descriptor, the server carries out all the data exchange with the client.